What's going on YouTube? It is the middle of December. It feels like a good time to do the first bracketology video of the college basketball season. I'll probably do 3 of these. They're fun to do, and so far it's been a fun college basketball season. Just a heads up, usually when people do bracketology, they like to predict what it would look like if a selection show was today. I like to basically predict what it's going to be. I just think it's more fun to do it that way, so if you're confused about anything I have, that's probably why. This is the seeding breakdown for the 1 seeds. This is in order, by the way: Arizona, Michigan, UConn, Purdue. So for the number 1 overall seed, it's really close between Arizona, Michigan, and UConn. The reason I'm going to Arizona is basically because UConn played a few games without Terrace Reed, and they probably should have won. They probably would have won that Arizona game if Terrace Reed had been healthy. So basically, Arizona picked up an undeserving win, which is still going to look really good on the resume. So for that reason, that's the kind of a tiebreaker for me. And then Purdue's been the number 1 overall seed for the longest time, so 1 loss doesn't change everything. For the 2 seeds, I'm sticking with my preseason prediction that Louisville is the best team in the ACC. I'm sticking with it. I have no reason to change it so far. So Louisville, Duke, followed by BYU and Gonzaga. BYU is kind of a weird team. They lost to UConn and Boston by 2. That was really impressive, but they've also struggled against teams like Dayton, Villanova, and Clemson. So they're kind of a weird team. And Gonzaga looked really good, and they still are a really good team. It's just that they lost to Michigan by 40, which, I mean, no shame. Michigan's been beating everybody by 40, but it's just weird. Gonzaga's still really good, though. For the 3 seeds, I have Iowa State after picking up a really impressive blowout win at Purdue. They also looked really good in the Players era. And then Alabama, who lost to Purdue at home, also beat Illinois on the road with St. John's on the road. Alabama looks pretty good. Kansas looked really good, or not really good, but they looked good in the Players era without Darren Peterson. So you can imagine how good they would look with Darren Peterson. They hung with UConn. And I think with Darren Peterson, it wouldn't be surprising if they won a national championship. And then Illinois is also really good. For the 4 seeds, you have 2 teams who had really high preseason expectations, and they kind of have not met those yet in St. John's and Houston, followed by Michigan State and North Carolina. Michigan got all the way up to 7th in the country. I think they're a little bit overrated just because they beat teams like North Carolina and Kentucky, teams that have been dealing with injuries. So I think they're a smidge overrated. For the 5 seeds, you have the preseason number 3 team in the country in Florida. They just have not looked number 3 good so far. And then Kentucky, who people are starting to talk about Kentucky not making the tournament. Calm down. They have not been close to healthy for the entire season. Jalen Lowe hasn't played since like the middle of November. Kentucky is fine. All of their losses are to really good teams. Kentucky will be in the tournament. I still feel like they're good, although Indiana's going to be tough. Followed by Tennessee and Auburn. So all SEC teams for the 5 seeds. In the 6 seeds, you have Arkansas, who looked a little bit concerning. They hadn't picked up a good win, and then they looked sluggish against teams like Winthrop and Stanford, but they finally got a really good win against Louisville, so finally Arkansas proves themselves. Followed by Texas Tech and UCLA, who both, I think, are really good teams. UCLA, they haven't been fully healthy all year. Tyler Bildo, they had to play without for a few games, which caused them to lose to Cal on a neutral court. That was a really bad loss for them. Not having Tyler Bildo isn't a true excuse. They still should have won that game, but sympathy points. I'm still high on UCLA, and Vanderbilt has looked really good so far. In the 7 seeds, you have Nebraska, a team who just beat Wisconsin by 30. Nebraska looks really good. Indiana looks up and down, but I think Indiana's a good team. Really bad loss against Minnesota, but outside of that, they've looked solid. St. Mary's has looked like a solid mid-major so far. Other really good mid-majors that I think are really good this year, Utah State and VCU, both picked up really bad losses recently. Utah State getting blown out by South Florida, and VCU losing at home to New Mexico. St. Mary's has not gone through a bad loss yet. Hopefully that stays that way. And then Clemson, who almost beat BYU. Yeah, they deserve to be a 7 seed. I think they'll be ranked at some point in the year. 8 seeds, you have Seton Hall, who's a team who had no preseason expectations, but they have looked really solid. USC, NC State, Baylor, kind of teams who have been up and down. I will say, after the top 6 seeds, This is just my evaluation so far. This could change easily, but after the top 6 seeds, I feel like it gets kind of thin, which might be disrespectful to Nebraska, but that's just how I feel about this so far. 9 seeds, you have Utah State, Wisconsin, Syracuse, Missouri. Syracuse picked up a really good win against Tennessee. 10 seeds, Georgia, VCU, Washington, Cincinnati. Washington and Cincinnati have gone through a ton of injuries so far. So if they get back to full strength soon, I think they'll be really good in conference play. Last 4 in, Georgetown, Notre Dame, Maryland, San Diego State. First 4 out, Ohio State, Miami, Villanova, Virginia. I know I have Virginia's ranked right now, and yet I have them out. I'm sorry, Virginia has not done anything impressive to me so far. Until they do that, then I still have doubts that they're going to make the tournament. And then next 4 out, Texas, Dayton, TCU, Wyoming. So I wrote all this down yesterday before the games, and the team not mentioned here that's right next to Wyoming is Iowa. And Iowa looked impressive against Iowa State, so if I did this now, I'd probably swap Wyoming and Iowa. The 12 seeds, usually the most dangerous mid-majors in March, Liberty, Yale, Northern Iowa, High Point. I think all 4 of those teams have pretty good potential. 13 seeds, Miami, Ohio. I think the MAC might be the best mid-major conference this year. The MAC has a ton of good teams. Whoever gets out of it, it's going to be really good. Miami is undefeated so far, but I think that's going to change quickly because the MAC has a lot of threats. I think Miami's going to pick up a few losses. McNeese, despite losing half the roster, despite losing Will Wade, they still got Javon Garcia and DJ Richards. McNeese is still a good team. UNC Wilmington and UC San Diego, despite losing everybody, despite having that really good year last year and losing their whole roster, now they have Leo Beath and they just a revamped roster. It reminds me of Drake after they lost Darian DeVries, and the next year they had Ben and Sturts, and they were still a really good team. That might be what UC San Diego is right now. 14 seeds, Cal Baptist, who I had winning the WAC preseason. I didn't see anyone else have that. But Cal Baptist has looked really impressive so far. St. Thomas and Vermont, I think those teams will be kind of dominant in their conferences. And Idaho picked up an impressive road win against South Dakota State. So I jumped them up to the 14 seeds. 15 seeds, you have South Alabama, who I think just has 2 losses so far, coming off the Sun Belt. Tennessee State out of the Ohio Valley. Oakland's a team who hung with Purdue the entire first half. Oakland has hung with good teams this year, so watch out for them. And then I had Mercer winning the SoCon preseason. The SoCon's kind of a mess right now. There's not really a distinctly good team. There's a bunch of good teams, but not a distinctly really good one. I think Mercer's one of those good teams, and I'm sticking with my preseason predictions. And then 16 seeds, Austin PA, Navy, Quinnipiac, Norfolk State, LIU, Brooklyn, and Bethune-Cookman. Now on to the bracket. You have Arizona advancing, NC State over Wisconsin. NC State has a couple good perimeter defenders against Sean Blackwell and Nick Boyd. Florida over High Point. I think Florida's interior defense will bother Cameron Fletcher and make Owen Aquino a scorer. I think this is a good matchup for Miami, Ohio, but it's just not quite enough. Not taking the upset there. Arkansas over UNLV. And by the way, I forgot to mention that I have Tulsa winning the American Athletic Conference. I think that conference is a one-bid league this year, which is a big downfall. But I think Tulsa's legitimately the best team in that conference this year. And then pretty much every year there's a bid stealer, there's a surprise bid stealer. I think this year it's going to be UNLV because UNLV had decent preseason expectations, but they've dealt with a ton of injuries. Miles Che has not played a game yet, and they still have wins like at Memphis. So you see the potential there. It's just they haven't been able to put together a resume because of their injuries. But the Mountain West tournament is all home games for UNLV. So if they're back to full strength by conference play and they get going and they go into the conference tournament all home games, I think they have a real chance to be a bid stealer. And I think there'd be an interesting one. So UNLV just makes the most sense to me as a bid stealer. It's a little early to predict bid stealers, but that's what I'm going with. So I think in this matchup, I think it would be too tough of a trip for UNLV since the 3 seeds Illinois. I'm taking Illinois over Cal Baptist, Clemson over VCU just because they're the better team, and BYU advancing as well. Arizona over NC State, Florida over North Carolina. Both teams have strong interior defenses, but interior defense bothers North Carolina a little more than it bothers Florida. Illinois over Arkansas, and BYU over Clemson. I'm taking Florida to upset Arizona. They're the more experienced team, and Arizona loves running a lot of their offense inside the arc, but with Florida's size, I think they're going to bother them a lot. BYU over Illinois, and BYU to make it to the Final Four over Florida. Now to the next region, Purdue over Austin Peay, Missouri over Seton Hall. This one's a really close one because I think the matchup is really good for Seton Hall. But Missouri went through a tough loss in the first round last year to Drake. And this is their second try with this core, their second go around. So I think they're going to have that game at the back of their minds. And they're the more experienced team. This 5-12 game it's really close. I think it's a perfect matchup for Northern Iowa. It's just Kentucky's gone through a lot of adversities already early in the season. And I think adversity makes teams stronger. So it's really close. I'm still taking Kentucky. And I'm taking Houston over UNC Wilmington. I'm taking Maryland to upset Texas Tech. They have a lot of guys that can slow down J.D. Toppin. And since they have the playing game, I think Texas Tech is going to be rustier. Alabama over Vermont. Indiana over Georgia. I think Surreal's impact is limited because Indiana's offense is mostly through their guard play. And Duke advances. And then Purdue over Missouri. Houston over Kentucky. Alabama over Maryland. Duke over Indiana. And I'm taking Houston over Purdue because Purdue's interior defense is really good, but Houston's offense is mostly guard play. And I think it's brutal if Purdue, this is the South region, by the way. And I think it would be brutal if Purdue had to play Houston in the Sweet 16 in the South region. And then Alabama over Duke because they're the more experienced team. And I think they also benefit from being in the South. And I'm taking Houston to go to the Final Four over Alabama because I like taking slow-paced teams over fast-paced teams in March. Now over here, Michigan advances. Utah State over Baylor because Utah State got absolutely embarrassed in the first round last year. They're going to want to change that for sure. Yale, kind of the same reason. Yale went through a tough loss last year. They still have the core together. And St. John's over UC San Diego. You've got Dylan Mitchell guarding Leo Beef. Vanderbilt over the play-in team. I think that's a really low-scoring play-in game. Iowa State advances. I haven't had a chance to watch Nebraska so far, but Cincinnati has gone through adversity with Jalen Haynes, who's kind of an under-the-radar, forgotten, injured player. I thought preseason he'd maybe be their best player. I'm not sure if that's going to happen now. I'm not even sure if he'll start over Mustafa Thiem, but I think he will be a big impact player. I think if they get him back by conference play, they'll make the tournament just fine. And like I said, adversity makes teams stronger. Possibly the shock of the tournament, Utah State upsets Michigan. Their guard play gets going. Their guard play ballers, Elliot Cadeau and Roddy Gale. I think they take full advantage of Michigan's turnover problem. St. John's over Yale. This is a really close one as well. St. John's to Yale. It's just St. John's went through a tough second round upset loss last year as well. They really don't want that to happen again, so that's why I'm taking St. John's barely. Vanderbilt over Iowa State. These are two kind of similar teams, except Vanderbilt is the better three-point shooting team. And as great as Iowa State's defense is, their three-point defense is not that great. And also, both of these teams are really good at not turning it over. And more of Iowa State's defense is forcing turnovers. So I think Vanderbilt pulls off the upset, and Gonzaga gets past Cincinnati. St. John's over Utah State, Gonzaga over Vanderbilt. And this is a really good Elite Eight game. I'm barely taking Gonzaga. Now to the last region, UConn gets past Navy. This is a really good one. Syracuse barely over USC. I think the matchup is good for USC. It's just with UConn's the 1 seed, this would be a pretty amazing game location advantage for Syracuse. That would be such a tough trip for USC. So it's really close if I'm taking Syracuse. And I think this would be the most popular upset if this bracket was real. Liberty over Auburn. I think it would also be the most obvious upset pick. Liberty, once again, is one of those teams that got embarrassed in the first round last year. And this is their second go-around with this core of Caden Matheny, Zach Cleveland, Colin Porter, etc. So I think this time they get it done. And Michigan State over McNeese. I'm taking Tulsa over UCLA because with Kansas as the 3 seed, I think Tulsa gets a really solid game location advantage. Kansas over St. Thomas. St. Mary's over Washington. I think Washington's best defender is Steinbach, but more of St. Mary's offense runs through their guard play. And Louisville avoids the upset, although Oakland has proved that they could pull off an upset. UConn over Syracuse, Michigan State over Liberty, Kansas over Tulsa, Louisville over St. Mary's. All of that is easy. UConn over Michigan State, two teams with strong interior defenses. I think that affects Michigan State a little more. And Louisville over Kansas. Louisville has solid perimeter defenders, so that can bother Darren Peterson. And this is another tough Elite Eight game. I'm leaning UConn just a little bit. Now to the Final Four. Houston upsets BYU because, once again, Houston's playing against a team with a good interior defense, but their offense is mostly guard play, so I think their guard play gets going. UConn over Gonzaga. I think UConn's size ballers Gonzaga with guys like Braden Huff and Graham Ike, the guys they like to run their offense through. And then in the national championship, two really good coaches, two storied programs. Houston has made this run because they've played a bunch of teams, Kentucky, Purdue, BYU, with strong interior defenses. This is another team with just that, except this time UConn's three-point defense is really good. So I think UConn wins the national championship. Dan Hurley wins his third of the last 4 years. Alex Caravan goes to the NBA as a college legend. And yeah, that's the bracket. And that's what it looks like. First one of the season. There will be two more probably. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you like videos like this, leave a like. And see you next time. Hopefully the rest of the college basketball season is fun.